While Felicia Hardy visits Peter to see how he's doing after hearing about the return of his parents, Mary Jane calls to remind him that he's due in Forest Hills to show them around the city that evening. After the call, Peter tells Felicia that he must go while brushing off her questions, but he thanks her for caring. Meanwhile, MJ informs Peter's parents that he's on his way, and when Aunt May suggests she stay home, Richard insists that she come along, explaining that they are not trying to take her place in Peter's life. Mary Jane agrees, adding that they all have a place in Peter's heart as a family. 1 hour later, Peter and Mary Jane show Richard and Mary around Manhattan, who are surprised by how much things have changed in the city, for better or for worse. Peter then offers to take them to a nice restaurant, and when he covertly asks MJ if she deposited her check from work, she winks, saying she's got him covered. However, a purse snatcher catches Peter's attention, and he quickly reports that he will call the police, while making a quick exit to become Spider-Man. Then, after webbing up the thief, he is suddenly attacked by a robot, the second one of the day, and after swinging back near the Parkers, Richard and Mary are shocked to learn about the costumed hero Spider-Man. Seeing them in danger below, Peter goes on the offensive and quickly ends the battle. Then he slips away to change back into Peter Parker and rejoin his family, and Mary Jane is happy to see that he's okay. After Peter's parents suggest Peter move to the suburbs as the city seems unsafe, Peter wonders who is sending these robots after him and why. Meanwhile, at a secret facility, Smythe has been watching and declares that this is only the beginning. The next day, Peter arrives at ESU to meet with his parents, along with Mary Jane, Flash, and Felicia. Upon his arrival, Richard expresses how proud he is of Peter for continuing his education. Then, Flash and Peter exchange memories of their time in school together and how things have changed since then. Meanwhile, reflecting on the time she lost with her son, Peter's mother begins to cry, prompting Mary Jane and Richard to comfort her. When Flash notices that Peter is looking shaky, he asks what's going on, and Peter quietly tells Flash that he isn't sure these people are really his parents. Soon, at the campus cafeteria, Peter overhears students discussing that Electro is fighting a SWAT team nearby. Immediately getting up, Peter announces he's going to go take pictures, and when MJ tries to question if he really must go this time, he insists it's his job. When Felicia offers to come along while claiming it could be fun, Peter tells her there's nothing she can do. Upset by the dismissal, Felicia silently vows that this will be the last time Peter ever tells her that. Meanwhile, coping with the stress of Peter's abrupt departure, Mary Jane pulls out a cigarette. When a student points out that it's a non-smoking area, she insists that she needs it more than he doesn't. Later that day, at the Tinker's hideout, Felicia Hardy meets with the criminal inventor. She's pleased with the newly finished equipment, ready to become the Black Cat once again. Later, at the Parkers' Soho loft, Peter paces on the ceiling, explaining to his wife that the return of his parents has made him worry about death and the chances he takes as Spider-Man. He adds that his parents would be devastated if he were hurt or killed, prompting Mary Jane to respond sarcastically, as he seems to care more about their feelings than hers. Peter reminds her that while he knows she worries, she knew what she signed up for when she said "I do," whereas his parents have no idea he is Spider-Man. When he asks his wife to show him the strength he married, he kisses her, but then pulls away due to the taste of cigarettes on her breath, remarking that she tastes like an ashtray. Sarcastically calling him Mr. Romantic, MJ explains that strength or no strength, she still worries that he will never come home, and asks that he allow her a way to cope while holding up a cigarette. After a moment of silence, where the Parkers reflect on the fact that their love is stronger than their fears, Peter gently kisses his wife on the neck before departing for his superhero duties. Later, after Felicia reveals to Peter that she is once again the Black Cat, she returns home with him to flaunt her new costume and abilities in front of Mary Jane. Jumping around, she explains that her special new implants help her balance and agility, while an unimpressed MJ retorts for her to watch the furniture, as this isn't a pet store. Hearing this, Felicia responds that it seems she isn't the only cat around, and then continues to show off her new retractable claws, which impress Peter, but cause MJ to remark that she's nauseous. Finally, after Felicia explains her enhanced vision from her new contact lenses, Peter asks what Flash thinks about this. Felicia admits she hasn't told Flash about being the Black Cat, fearing he may have trouble dealing with someone he loves being in danger all the time. Lighting up a cigarette, Mary Jane remarks that it's enough to drive you to smoke, and then asks Peter to change clothes, as they have normal people to see. A short time later, Mary Jane and Peter join his parents at Barclay Park, and as they reminisce about the past, Peter discovers that they do not remember the family dog, who nearly drowned in the lake. When Peter begins questioning them on why they can't remember, Mary Jane pulls him aside to tell him to lighten up, explaining that since they spent 20 years in a Russian prison, their memory about a dog is not a big deal. Hearing this, Richard and Mary begin to realize how many things they can't remember. This discovery makes them want to seek answers from a man they met recently who claimed to know them, named Shattuck, but seeing that the Parkers are busy arguing, they decide to wait for another time to talk about it. Soon, Mary Jane lands a small side role in a film titled Strained Relations, playing the adopted daughter of a movie star who has fallen in love with her mother's husband. Since her role in Secret Hospital has recently been cut back, she is grateful for the part. As her scene begins, Mary Jane starts thinking about her past, recalling how her father Philip was an alcoholic and a failed writer who abusively took out his frustrations on his family. After this, the director cuts the scene, explaining that MJ is too tense. When they try the scene again, MJ remembers how her mother eventually left her father, but also how her sister Gail's marriage fell apart after she had children and her husband left her. Following her mother's tragic death, she recalls turning her back on Gail and running away to live with her Aunt Anna. From there, she reflects on how happy things have become since she met and married Peter and became part of his family. However, she's still concerned about Peter's returned parents and if they are truly who they say they are. After the scene ends, the director tells Mary Jane her take was better, but he needs more sorrow for the next scene. This time, Mary Jane imagines a possibility of being part of a happy family with Peter's parents and how wonderful it would be if they were loving and accepting of her. However, she then fears the possibility that she may be wrong and that they may not accept her. This leads MJ to spiral into her deep-seated fears, imagining a future where a conflict arises between Peter's parents and her, leading her to imagine herself running away again, just as she used to. Mary Jane begins to tear up, dwelling on how she's never loved or wanted anything in her life more than Peter, and the thought of losing him absolutely terrifies her. This time, after the director calls cut, he is thrilled that Mary Jane has nailed the emotional scene, but soon realizes that she is legitimately crying. Approaching Mary Jane, the director offers her a shoulder to cry on, telling her to just let it all out. Meanwhile, Peter teams up with the Black Cat in a life-or-death battle against Smythe's Spider Slayers, and shortly after, he escapes death again against a secret agent Shattuck, while trying to follow leads on his parents' lapsed memories. The next day, the Parkers all meet up for a family dinner at Aunt May's, and Peter privately admits to MJ that the house feels like home again with Aunt May accepting his parents as family. He further explains that the encounter with Shattuck the previous day seemed to give his parents' story some credibility, and perhaps he should finally give them a chance. When a concerned Mary Jane asks how Felicia is doing, Peter admits he hasn't called her, and since Smythe almost caused the death of both Felicia and his parents, he wants to handle this on his own. A fearful MJ tries to protest, but a phone call interrupts, and afterward, Peter announces he got the information needed and has to go. Again, MJ asks if Peter can get another hero to take on this battle, or at least get some help, but Peter says that he can't risk anyone else getting hurt. As he walks away, MJ reaffirms that she loves Peter, but admits his decisions are hurting her, and while she thought she was strong enough to handle him being Spider-Man, and she was for a while, his recent battles have her questioning her own strength. Then, as she pulls out her cigarettes, MJ tries to justify smoking again by saying at least it's not drugs and alcohol, while declaring that she can quit at any time. That evening, Peter defeats Smythe after a man tragically dies during the battle, finally putting an end to the invasion of the Spider Slayers. The next night, Peter takes Mary Jane out for dinner, and after assuring her his battle against the Spider Slayers is over, he admits that the dinner is his way of apologizing for how he's neglected her lately. Thanking her husband, Mary Jane promises not to smoke that night, which pleases Peter, as he admits the last couple days has made him realize how precious life is and how short. He adds that he should appreciate what he is while he has it, and that includes her, Aunt May, and his parents, whom he is now considering revealing that he is Spider-Man to. Calling Peter sweetheart, a surprised Mary Jane replies that doing so would be quite a step. Affirming this, Peter admits it's a big chance, but he points out that with important things, much like their marriage, the rewards are worth the risks. As time passes, the Parkers bond further with Peter's parents, having gone to Central Park to skate with them. Peter skates circles around everyone, but intentionally slips to cover for his spider abilities after Richard comments on his extraordinary balance. Smiling, Mary Jane approaches Peter, telling him she knows he wants to get close to his parents, but he doesn't need to try so hard, as it's clear that they love him. After they wrap up, Aunt May says that since they are family again, they'll have to do lots of things together. Richard turns to Peter, whom he calls son, and proclaims it's a promise, and Peter agrees, affectionately calling Richard Dad. However, upon realizing the time, Peter must decline an invitation from his parents to get hot chocolate and pretzels, as he is late for class. Turning to her husband, Mary Jane assures him that she'll see that Aunt May gets home. Running off, Peter says they'll all have lunch and watch MJ's soap opera the next day, before he slips into the forest to change into Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Mary Jane pulls out a cigarette, and when Mary points out that smoking is bad for her health, Mary Jane agrees, saying she'll quit again soon. Then, upon seeing Spider-Man web sling away, she adds that she's just been under a lot of stress lately. Later, while seeing Aunt May off on a city bus in Lower Manhattan, Mary Jane announces it's her last chance to get cocoa and cookies. However, May insists she's tired, but while entering the bus, assures MJ that she'll join the Parkers to watch Secret Hospital the next day. After May is gone, Mary Jane is startled when Eddie Brock abruptly appears and approaches Peter's parents, demanding their identities. Realizing they are all in danger, MJ considers looking for the police or the army, but looking up, she is thrilled to see her husband swinging overhead and calls out for Spider-Man. Quickly turning to see the wall crawler, Brock turns into Venom, and after claiming that he'll save them all from Spider-Man, he lunges into the air to engage in battle. But after Peter is beaten into unconsciousness, he wakes to find that Venom is gone, and then quickly finds Mary Jane, who is talking to the police. When he asks her where Venom is, a panicked Mary Jane tells Spider-Man that he's gone, and he took her husband's parents with him. After the abduction, Peter tracks Venom down to an amusement park to battle the villain and retrieve his parents, until the confrontation eventually results in the two making a truce. Still, Peter manages to tag Venom with a spider tracer when he departs. Finally free from the villain's wrath, Peter then returns home to tell his wife everything that has happened. Then, after Peter spends hours on the phone, MJ asks her husband if everything is okay. Peter replies that his parents are fine, but his attempts to keep tabs on Venom have failed, as the villain has disappeared without a trace. Concerned, Mary Jane questions what this could mean, and Peter replies that he doesn't know, wondering if he can really trust the word of a madman. Later at Aunt May's home, the Parkers prepare for a family dinner, but Peter is running late. Aunt May suggests they start, planning to reheat leftovers for Peter later, while Richard discusses his son's absence, not understanding why he didn't call. After Mary Jane explains that with Peter's busy schedule, she rarely gets to share a meal with him, the doorbell suddenly rings. When MJ opens the door, she is surprised to see that Peter has brought along Betty Brant. Giving his alarmed wife a kiss, Peter explains that he was stuck late at the Bugle, so Betty offered to give him a ride over. Meanwhile, Betty says she hopes she isn't intruding, but she has been anxious to meet Peter's parents. Aunt May welcomes Betty in, while Peter's parents add that it's a pleasure to get to know Peter's friends. When Mary explains they were just asking about MJ's character in Secret Hospital, Betty dismisses the subject, turning the topic over to the real-life past adventures of Peter's parents. As the focus of the special family evening shifts towards Betty, a disappointed MJ holds a saddened gaze, as if her moment of validation with Peter's parents has been stolen. Then, an oblivious Aunt May offers her more gravy. Soon, Peter gets entangled in a battle with the Blood Rose and the Foreigner cyber warriors during their siege on Fisk Tower. After Peter finally gets a chance to return the photos of the siege to the Bugle, he runs into Mary Jane, who tells him to look alive. His wife is starved. However, when Peter kisses her, he pulls away, struggling from the taste of her smoking. Not making any excuses, MJ claims Peter will get used to it, as he places his fingers on her lips. Then, when Peter suggests they talk about it further over dinner, Mary Jane admits she already ate, and seductively whispers that she was looking for a little dessert of a different kind. Some time later, Mary Jane visits Aunt May's house to see if she or Peter's parents have seen her husband, as he was gone when she woke up that morning. They haven't seen him recently, but Richard and Mary guess that he may be out with one of his friends. Mary Jane is then invited to stay for breakfast, but she declines, saying she just had an idea where Peter could be and must tell him about a new career opportunity that popped up. Then, lighting up a cigarette, Mary Jane takes a cab to Betty Brant's apartment, who she considers has been a little too active in their lives lately. When she arrives, she sees the silhouette of a man getting his jacket next to Betty from her apartment window. Thinking it's Peter, MJ assures herself there must be a good explanation for this, and she intends to find out what it is. However, after entering the building, she is relieved when it turns out to be Joe Robertson. He tells Mary Jane that he sent Peter upstate on a photo assignment, so she leaves, relieved to at least know where Peter is. That night after Peter's return, Mary Jane joins him in bed and tells him about her encounter with Joe Robertson at Betty's place, almost embarrassed to admit that she thought she'd find Peter there. But Peter thinks that Betty and Joe's business should be left alone, and turns the topic back to the job opportunity she wanted to discuss, explaining that he's not sure he can take the job with his hectic schedule. While Mary Jane isn't sure either, she explains that the secret hospital needs new publicity photo portfolios of the cast, and she's confident Peter is the best man for the job. Then, after turning on the television, they catch a news report about a man that was brought to the hospital by Spider-Man, who was later murdered. Hearing this, Peter quickly begins to change into Spider-Man, telling his wife that he needs to deal with this before he takes on more responsibilities as Peter Parker. As he climbs out the window, Mary Jane lights up a cigarette. Seeing this, Peter swings out into the city while worrying about how much Mary Jane has been smoking lately. He He thinks about the fact that she's usually more than supportive of his superhero career, realizing that's one of the things he loves most about her, but he's beginning to understand what it must be like to be constantly afraid for your spouse. In the coming days, as Spider-Man is being framed for murder by a man named Farron, also known as the Master of Vengeance, Peter is at home with Mary Jane watching TV. Flipping through 64 channels, MJ announces that nothing good is on, so Peter decides to take the opportunity to request a quiet evening together for some romance. In agreement, Mary Jane adds that she hopes it's not too quiet, but her attention is suddenly stolen by footage of Spider-Man killing people playing on TV. Realizing it's the news and not some TV drama, Peter becomes furious and begins changing into Spider-Man. As he does, Mary Jane says she's surprised people don't imitate him more often, given the alluring glamour of being an outlaw in a mask. Replying that imitation isn't flattery in this case, Peter puts on his mask, proclaiming that he's going to find out who is behind this and ensure there are no more killings. After an encounter with Farron, as well as the Punisher, who both escape, Peter returns back home. Upon seeing his wife in bed, Peter thinks of how gorgeous she looks and how he just wants to scoop her up into his arms. Deciding to let her sleep, Peter prepares for bed, dwelling on how supportive Mary Jane has been over the years. He admits that sometimes he almost wishes she'd make him choose between her and Spider-Man. However, even when feeling the great burden of his responsibilities, all it takes is a look at his wife's smiling face to confirm that his life is good. Smiling at the thought, Peter dozes off, but as if no time passes at all, the alarm clock begins to go off, jolting him awake. As Peter tries to bury himself back under the covers, Mary Jane stretches after a restful slumber, announcing to her lover that it's time to rise and shine. Upon seeing her husband protest, she kisses him, asking if her poor Peter had a rough night. When Peter tries to convince his wife to let him stay in bed, she reminds him that they are short on money and he's due at the Bugle. Then, as Peter runs off a list of caffeinated beverages to help him wake up, Mary Jane announces she can do a lot better than that and removes her nightgown, perking up Peter, as she's wearing nothing underneath. Later, after a battle with Farron, the villain is knocked out and Spider-Man removes his mask but still doesn't recognize the man, despite him swearing revenge on the wall crawler. Perplexed, Peter returns home that night and lies awake in bed, only for Mary Jane to notice that her husband's mind is racing when she returns to the bedroom. After she tells him to get some sleep, Peter claims he was just waiting for her. Knowing her husband, MJ says that Peter is obsessing and sarcastically asks who the girl is. Retorting that she's very funny, Peter reveals that he's been wondering if his actions as Spider-Man can have a negative impact on people's lives. After confirming that Peter is talking about Farron, Mary Jane explains that people like that develop unhealthy fixations, and if it wasn't with Peter, it would have been someone else. Then, after MJ tells Peter to sleep before she comes gunning for him, Peter's mind turns to how he let the Punisher escape again and how he feels partially responsible for all the people the vigilante has since killed. As MJ snuggles up to her husband to go to sleep, Peter swears he won't let the Punisher get away again. After a battle against sticks and stone and an unsuccessful day of trying to get photos for the Bugle, Peter returns home, frustrated about his financial situation. Hearing the TV on, Peter checks the living room to find his wife unexpectedly home. Upon seeing him, Mary Jane asks her lover for kisses, adding that she could really use them. Confused, Peter asks if something is wrong. So MJ reveals that not only is she barely getting any screen time in Secret Hospital, but there is now talk at the studio of killing off her character. After Peter counters that they'll probably bring her back as her own evil twin, MJ explains they won't because the cuts are due to budget issues and falling ratings. With both of them barely finding work, Mary Jane questions what they're going to do if she loses her job. Days later, Spider-Man races home to meet his wife for an important evening out when a wall of a building suddenly blows open, getting him into a battle with a super-powered cyborg named Annex. At that moment, Mary Jane is anxiously waiting at home for Peter to return, smoking while stressing about her husband being late. With the window open, she overhears an altercation from the street and imagines that the violence is directed towards Peter. As she tells herself not to be paranoid, that not every attack is directed towards her husband, a news report on the TV suddenly reveals that Spider-Man is in conflict with a strange cyborg. Frustrated not out of anger, but out of fear, MJ begins to smoke more, realizing that she's scared, and the more scared she is, the more she smokes, which makes her feel rotten about herself. That's when Peter calls to inform her that he is canceling their evening plans to stop the cyborg. After checking if he forgot about the award ceremony, MJ asks if he can let the city's other heroes handle this crisis, reminding him that he is up for a key photojournalist award that evening. However, Peter doesn't believe he will get the award with Jonah being one of the judges, and asks that MJ go by herself and cover for him, adding that he'll get some good photos that evening for next year's award. After hanging up, Peter assures himself that his wife will be okay, while MJ tries to encourage herself to make the best of things that evening. As Peter continues his battle, Mary Jane soon arrives at the Adarko building, where she is greeted by Jonah. After he asks where her husband is, MJ says he'll be there when he can, and then meets Mr. Dunson, who is hosting the ceremony. Dunson says he's a great admirer of her husband's work, as he was also an amateur photographer before he founded his company, and he's been hosting the awards in honor of his son, who passed away in the military. Hearing this, Mary Jane gives Dunson her sympathy. Meanwhile, Peter learns that Annex is Alex Ellis, a former soldier who was awarded the Purple Heart for bravery in the same battle that killed Dunson's son. At the same time, Mary Jane listens to Dunson's heated speech at the awards, commenting to Jonah that it sounds like a rant. Then, as Dunson claims that Alex Ellis is a traitor who failed to save his son, Annex suddenly crashes in through the wall to confront Dunson, who then flees to a nearby lab. Soon, after Peter helps resolve the situation and Dunson is taken away by the police, Mary Jane stands by waiting for a chance to talk to her husband. After Annex departs, she follows Peter up to a rooftop and calls for him, resulting in a surprised Peter replying that she shouldn't be up there. But Mary Jane explains that she didn't want to wait for him at home only for him to not show up until late, and approaches him to put her arms around her husband. She then apologizes for how she acted, telling him that he did a lot of good, saved people from getting hurt, and she's proud of him. It's just that sometimes she feels like he takes too much of the load. Empathizing with his wife, Peter says she's probably right, and after reflecting on the recent events, Peter says he believes that the city will get more help soon, as he doesn't think they've seen the last of Annex. Some time later, the Parkers spend the evening dancing at the trendy Rainbow Room located at the Rockefeller Center. After dancing, they sit down to eat lobster, but Peter can't stop complaining throughout their whole dinner. This starts a heated exchange at the table where both Peter and MJ are extra combative, arguing over never having a simple evening to themselves, their ongoing financial troubles, and even MJ's smoking putting her health at risk. Just as Peter remarks that everyone is accountable for their actions, his spider sense suddenly goes off, making him drop his lobster, causing the juices to splatter all over Mary Jane's dress. Furious, MJ asks if Peter's remark about being accountable includes this, and when he tries to apologize, she tells him to save it, as she storms off to get cleaned up. At first, Peter can't blame Mary Jane for getting upset, but then he notices that everyone around them is starting to become agitated and combative. With his spider sense screaming, Peter rushes to the elevator where he changes into Spider-Man, intent on finding the source of the low-level paranoia that has spread across the restaurant. As he swings out into the city, Mary Jane sees him from the window and demands the check. Shortly after, Peter engages in battle with the members of the Cadre, including one member who has been using her powers to alter people's perceptions. After a day out and an encounter with his parents that leaves Peter feeling paranoid, he returns home, eager to see his wife. But as he takes the elevator up and the doors open, his spider sense suddenly goes off, and he is shocked to discover Harry Osborn and his family waiting for him with Mary Jane. As she smokes, MJ is clearly in distress, but claims that it's wonderful that Harry is back, and that it's incredible that they let him out of the vault. After Harry gloats that his lawyers managed to get him released on technicalities, he thanks Peter for being there for his family while he was away, but then begins to sweat profusely, almost collapsing. Since Harry has been having fainting spells, Liz suggests that they go back to their apartment downstairs. Before they leave, Harry remarks on how great it is to see the Parkers, and after reflecting on how much they've been through together, he adds that life is funny and sad. As the elevator closes, his final words are that he is going to see the Parkers again very soon. After the Osborns are gone, Mary Jane asks her husband what they're going to do, and Peter then quickly grabs her by the arm and pulls her into their bedroom. In desperation, he begins frantically packing a bag for her, telling her that she needs to go to Aunt Anna's home in Florida until he can deal with Harry. However, after clarifying that she does not want to go, Mary Jane scoffs that Peter is mistakenly packing her dirty laundry, and then explains that she already understands Harry and the dangers involved. When Peter counters that Harry is crazy and nearly destroyed their lives recently, MJ throws the suitcase on the floor, insisting that she didn't forget, but will not spend the rest of her life running. Still, Peter insists that he wants her to be away, causing MJ to point out that it's only what he wants, and that she thought they were partners and should work out their problems together. But apparently, it's only when the big macho hero says so. Then, adding that they are in this together, or not in it at all, Mary Jane storms out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. A frustrated Peter then grabs a stone bookend and throws it into the wall in anger, proclaiming that Harry will not do this to them again. Shortly after, Mary Jane reflects on the recent drama while taking a walk, realizing her actions remind her of her own mother who used to scream and slam doors in high melodrama. Figuring it must be why she became an actress, MJ then realizes that she got carried away over how she's so sick of it all. While she knew what she was getting into marrying Peter, and she loves his heroic deeds and his courage, she believed she could keep things compartmentalized, Spider-Man in one place and Peter and MJ in another. But recently, with Venom, the Vulture, and Harry, she feels that their life together has been constantly violated. This has caused her to become scared that every time Peter leaves, one of his manic foes will finally kill him. While she's tried to keep these feelings from Peter, playing the stalwart wife, it's all become too much. Suddenly, Mary Jane stops dead in her tracks when she hears someone call out her name. Turning around, she is horrified to see the Green Goblin looming over her. Reaching out for Mary Jane, the Goblin then tells her that they need to talk. Hearing this, a startled Mary Jane begins to run, screaming no, as Harry takes pursuit on his glider. Catching up, Harry grabs her, replying yes, and flies away. As Peter begins searching for his wife, while fearing for her safety, Harry flies her to his chosen destination, telling her to stop struggling or they'll both crash. He then reveals that he is taking her to the very bridge where Gwen Stacy had died. Thinking that Harry has brought her here to kill her, Mary Jane tells him to get it over with because she is not afraid to die. Harry is so hurt by this. He takes off his goblin mask and tries to convince her that he didn't bring her to the bridge to murder her because she's his friend and he loves her. MJ replies that he has a funny way of showing it, causing Harry to attempt to calm her. Sitting down, he explains that he still misses Gwen after all these years and how his father was involved in her death. When Mary Jane tries to remind Harry that his father killed Gwen, Harry briefly loses his temper, saying that Peter framed his father. He then breaks down, deciding to surrender to the fact that nobody believes him, as everyone sees Peter as some kind of saint. After Mary Jane asks Harry why he brought her to the bridge, Harry explains that, regardless of what happens, his feud with Peter will never result in another situation like the death of Gwen Stacy. Believing Harry, Mary Jane listens as he begins talking about the good old days, when they were all innocent. However, Mary Jane points out that they were all dealing with their own problems. When she mentions Harry's father again, Harry snaps at her once more. Getting back on subject, Harry assures her that no matter what happens, she will be safe. Hearing this, Mary Jane asks Harry to take her home. Soon, Peter returns home from the Osborn mansion after getting no leads and is shocked to find Harry there with Mary Jane. Giving in to his rage, he orders Harry to get away from his wife and strikes him. Before Peter can lay into him further, Mary Jane stops her husband, explaining that Harry did not hurt her and just wanted to talk. Harry then pulls off Peter's mask, pointing out that he is always thinking the worst of him. Hearing this, Mary Jane tells Harry that both she and Peter want to help him and there must be a way to end all the insanity. But Harry replies that it's much too late for that, and once again reassures Mary Jane that she has nothing to fear from the Green Goblin as he puts his mask back on. He then leaves, telling the Parkers that his family is probably worried about him. Alone again, Mary Jane asks Peter what they will do next. Peter bitterly replies that he wishes he could go beat on Harry and throw him off a building, but reassures MJ that he's still the good guy and he won't kill anyone, not even Harry. Surprised over Peter's dark feelings, Mary Jane replies that Harry is still his friend, who is sick and needs help. But Peter counters that according to Harry their friendship is long over, and as Spider-Man's greatest enemy, Harry still blames him for everything wrong in his life. As Peter attempts to explain that Harry wants to kill him, Mary Jane lights a cigarette, frustrating Peter as he asks her to put it out. But MJ refuses and asks if they can go to the police about Harry and get a restraining order against him. However, Peter scoffs at the idea, certain that he'd have to blow his secret identity for it to work, and fed up over the smoke, he grabs the cigarette out of MJ's hand to put it out. After a heated exchange over the idea of revealing Peter's secret identity, Mary Jane finally points out that at least she is trying to come up with ideas, and she hasn't heard any from Peter. Losing his temper, Peter yells that he doesn't have any ideas, as he throws over a table, scattering MJ's cigarettes all over the room. Finally, the Parkers stop and look at each other, and in a moment of clarity and with no words left to say, they hug each other tightly. Days later, Mary Jane visits Liz to convince her to get Harry some help, but Liz is in total denial that anything is wrong. When Mary Jane pushes further, insisting that Harry could do something terrible, Liz says that her and Peter's crazy talk is just upsetting everyone. She then demands that Mary Jane leave, while suggesting that she is just as bad as Spider-Man. Soon, Mary Jane goes to the Osborn Foundation building for one last effort to talk some sense into Harry. She tells Harry that he is loved and Peter misses him and would give anything to have their friendship back, and then begs him not to destroy that, and not to destroy himself. After a brief pause, Harry counters that she told him on the bridge that the past wasn't as good as he remembered it, asking what makes her think the future will be any better. Then, As Harry opens his briefcase, revealing his Green Goblin costume, he states that he's learned that the only true answer is not love, but power. Holding the mask, Harry then proclaims that with it he is powerful, and the world will soon see that. However, after Harry tells MJ to leave and that it's too late for love, she still insists that she must stay, but the moment is interrupted by an alarm that signals Spider-Man's arrival. A furious Harry then loses it, turning to Mary Jane and yelling that her husband is everything that is wrong, and he's the only one who won't let go. Moments later, the Green Goblin crashes through the skylight to engage in battle with Spider-Man. After the vicious battle, it is revealed that the building has been rigged with bombs, and Harry explains to an incapacitated Peter that they are both better off dead. Meanwhile, in the same building, little Normie approaches Mary Jane after waking from his nap. As Peter pleads with Harry not to do this, explaining that life is precious, Harry suddenly realizes what he has done, and that his son and Mary Jane are in imminent danger. A horrified Harry explains this to Peter, who then desperately pleads with Harry to save them. But Harry insists that he's not a hero like Peter, and while reflecting on his father, claims that he can't do anything right. In response, Peter says that he doesn't care about Harry's father, it's Harry who he cares about. Seconds later, as Mary Jane walks up the stairs to bring Normie to his father, Harry flies in on his glider, grabbing her and Normie on his way toward the exit. Getting them out to safety, Harry proclaims that they are safe from the bombs. Hearing this, an alarmed Mary Jane questions where Peter is, asking if Harry left him inside to die. A conflicted Harry can't come up with a response, but in a decisive moment, he returns to pull Spider-Man out of the building, saving Peter's life just before it explodes. Seeing this, a relieved Mary Jane tells Harry how thankful she is, promising she won't forget what he did. But as she tries to hand him Normie, Harry suddenly collapses to the ground. After Mary Jane asks Peter to do something to help, Harry reveals that the Goblin formula has been slowly killing him. With his last moments, he buries the hatchet with Peter, claiming that he is his best friend. Then, as an ambulance arrives to take Harry away, he dies. After Peter tells his wife, MJ is stricken with grief, and while holding Normie, she walks him away while mourning, leaving Spider-Man to stand alone, also mourning the loss of his best friend. In the coming days, the Parkers attend the funeral of Harry Osborn. As it comes to an end, Peter dwells on the fact that aside from Mary Jane, Felicia is the only one who knows his secret identity, and she must be wondering about the real story behind Harry's death. Mary Jane then directs Peter's attention towards his parents and his Aunt May so that they can say their goodbyes. After this, Peter suggests they pay their respects to Liz, but Mary Jane privately requests that Peter talk to Liz alone. She explains that after everything that happened between them, she just wouldn't know what to say, and that Normie keeps glaring at them, as if he blames them for his father's death. Empathizing with his wife, Peter approaches a grieving Liz alone. She tells Peter that Harry loved him and that he wouldn't have wanted them to move out of their Soho loft, causing Peter to consider staying. Later at home, Mary Jane apologizes for the way she acted at the service, saying she wasn't ready to face Liz. Peter then reveals that Liz doesn't want them to move, causing MJ to take out a cigarette as they agree to discuss it. Seeing this, Peter tries to convince MJ to quit smoking by explaining that they just attended Harry's funeral and he doesn't want to attend hers in the future. However, MJ says not to confuse the issues, adding that Harry might have lived if he took up smoking instead of becoming the Green Goblin. Further, she turns the subject to Peter's health, explaining that his life is in constant jeopardy. Throwing his hands in the air, Peter admits she's right, but he can't ignore the great power he was given, reiterating that he's tried to in the past. MJ affirms that it's one of the qualities she loves most about Peter, and after he asks her what he should do, she suggests he take a break from Spider-Man for a couple weeks to give them both time to slow down and chill out from the constant stress. Hugging his wife, Peter agrees to try it, and Mary Jane thanks her husband, telling him that she loves him. Later, Mary Jane suggests that as a way to start their impromptu stay-at-home getaway, Peter should go get Chinese takeout. Grabbing his jacket, Peter leaves in his civilian clothes, dwelling on the fact that his wife was right, and they both need to take a break from the strain of the past few weeks. However, when he arrives to pick up his order, a news report over the radio announces trouble. Meanwhile, Mary Jane wonders what is taking Peter so long to return, trying to convince herself that maybe he just forgot the fortune cookies. Upon turning on the TV, however, she overhears the news that the brutal serial killer Carnage has escaped prison. Lighting up a cigarette, a worried MJ claims that she doesn't need the cookies to know Peter's fortune now. While Spider-Man gets his ribs broken while battling Carnage and his dangerous supervillain allies, Mary Jane waits at home anxiously. News reports indicate that Carnage has already claimed 87 lives, making MJ fear that Peter is probably next. She reflects on how, in some warped way, Peter must feel a twisted sense of responsibility for this, given his past role in bringing an alien symbiote to Earth. But despite their agreement to take a break from Spider-Man, Peter is out there facing the gravest threat of his life. She knows it, and before the recent events, she used to understand it. Downstairs, Liz continues to grieve over Harry's death, and after a knock on the door grabs her attention, Mary Jane walks in to visit, asking if Liz will accept her company. The two friends embrace, and Mary Jane tells Liz that they are all afraid for the future, but at least they can confront their fears together. Hearing this, Liz opens up to MJ, expressing her concerns about her brother and her son, Normie. Later, after returning to her apartment, Mary Jane lights another cigarette, hating her habit, almost as much as she hates waiting and wondering if Peter will return home alive this time. After hearing a noise and turning to find Peter dressed in costume, she exclaims that she knew that it was because of Spider-Man that he never returned with their takeout dinner. However, her attention is suddenly shifted to the fact that he is holding his ribcage. After she asks if he's hurt, Peter attempts to jokingly laugh it off, despite his injury clearly being serious. Seeing this, an infuriated MJ says it's no joke. Peter knows she worries for him, and furthermore, he said he'd take a break from being Spider-Man for a couple of weeks. When Peter clarifies that he said he'd only try, MJ frustratedly responds that it looks like he didn't try very hard. Later, after doctoring up her husband, a much calmer MJ states that the important thing is that Peter is home, and they can discuss things further the next day when they are both feeling better. But after MJ declares that at least his powers will help him heal overnight, Peter argues that Carnage and his allies will keep killing until he is stopped, and he must go after them again that night. In shock, Mary Jane tears up while exclaiming that Peter will be killed, and after stating that Liz just lost Harry, she asks Peter if she must lose him too. But when Peter explains that it's his responsibility and he can't let them go, MJ asks if it's that he can't, or is it that he won't. Then, feeling as though she is unable to speak sense to her husband, Mary Jane turns away while breaking further into tears. Later, after attempting to hunt down Carnage as Spider-Man, Peter manages to survive an encounter against Demogoblin and returns back home just before dawn to heal from his injuries. As the Parkers watch the news covering Carnage's mayhem, Peter becomes frustrated that he wasn't able to find the villain, but Mary Jane reminds Peter that he may have been killed if he had. Suddenly, there is a knock on the door, which Mary Jane goes to open. She answers the door assuming that it is Liz, only to find a severely injured Venom, barely conscious, who collapses on the floor. Seeing this, Peter rushes to Eddie's aid, which immediately upsets MJ as she tells Peter that Venom is the homicidal maniac whose life's goal is to kill him. When Peter tries to argue that Venom is in no shape to kill anyone, MJ reminds Peter of his broken promise and passionately explains that it's bad enough waiting for someone to kill him on the street, but she won't watch it happen in her own home. Storming out, she then runs into Liz in the hall, who is busy with her own affairs. This leaves MJ questioning who she can possibly talk to, especially since Liz is currently living MJ's worst nightmare in the aftermath of Harry's death. Soon, Mary Jane goes to visit Aunt May. Upon her arrival, she is welcome to sit down and talk while breakfast is prepared. Peter's parents bring up how awful it is that Harry died, which leads them to ask how Peter is doing, making MJ wonder herself. Meanwhile, Peter has teamed up with the Black Cat and a recovered Venom to go after Carnage. Just as he swings away, Mary Jane calls home to check on him, and as the call goes to voicemail, she fears the worst, praying that her husband is not dead. That evening, with her husband still missing, Mary Jane goes to the grand opening of a new nightclub to try to forget about her worries. As she dances, she thinks she sees Peter in the crowd and immediately approaches him, assuming her husband has come to patch things up with her. Unfortunately, it is a case of mistaken identity, as the man only vaguely resembles Peter when she gets close enough to see his face. MJ then returns to cut loose on the dance floor, while figuring Peter is still out being a hero, grabbing the attention of fans in the crowd who recognize her as the secret hospital starlet. However, the scene takes a horrific turn when Carnage and his villainous allies arrive at the club and begin slaughtering the patrons. Seeing this, Mary Jane tries to get out, but is knocked down by the panicking crowd. Looking up at the out-of-control villains slaughtering victims like a force of nature, she questions what made Peter think he could survive against such horrors, and then wonders where her husband is. As she watches the situation get worse, Venom and his crew suddenly crash through the wall, and a chunk of debris hits Mary Jane on the head, dazing her. As Mary Jane lies on the ground while barely hanging on to consciousness, Carnage spots her and is about to attack when Venom lashes back, telling Mary Jane to tell her husband that they are even. Shortly after, Spider-Man arrives and turns the tide of the battle until Carnage and his minions flee. In the aftermath, Spider-Man spots Mary Jane, and after asking if his gorgeous wife needs a lift, he pulls her out of the rubble just before the debris crashes down where she once lay. A relieved Mary Jane tells Peter that she needed him more than ever before, calling him handsome. However, after everyone is safe, Mary Jane cringes while Spider-Man decides to side with Venom, and while noticing that Peter can't look her way, she watches as he swings off with his former foe to go after Carnage. As dawn approaches, Peter continues his hunt for Carnage with his allies but wishes he had time to call Mary Jane to check on her, especially since their marriage has been so turbulent as of late. However, he figures the stakes are too high, even bigger than his or his wife's needs, and he must stop Carnage no matter the cost. Meanwhile in Soho, Liz knocks on the door to ask Mary Jane to join her for breakfast, but MJ declines while explaining that she was out late and needs rest. However, all she truly wants is for her husband to come home, and protecting herself with a knife due to the violence sweeping the city, she is ready to face whatever madness may come her way. A day later, Aunt May, Richard, and Mary drive into the city to check on Peter and Mary Jane, as they haven't been able to get through over the phone. After being saved from a gang by Flash Thompson and the Molten Man, they go upstairs to be welcomed by Mary Jane, Liz, and Normie. It turns out that Normie had accidentally knocked MJ's phone off the hook during a visit earlier that day, which Liz apologizes for. That evening, a frustrated Mary Jane tries to distract herself by reading a book, but can't stop thinking about Peter, torn between emotions of love and anger. Between thinking about Peter's broken promise and the boring book that she feels obligated to finish, Mary Jane's anger gets the better of her, and while proclaiming that she's too old to be wasting time on junk, she throws the book across the room. Then, as her anger fades, she is only left with fear, leading her to break down and pray that her husband doesn't die. Later, the Parkers and Flash Thompson seek refuge in the Osborn's loft, all except Mary Jane, who has been upstairs all by herself the whole time. While busy chain-smoking, she looks out the window, realizing that everyone downstairs is worried about her, while she is only worried about Peter. As she is lost in thought, Peter abruptly startles her from behind. Upon seeing him, all Mary Jane has are questions. Reflecting on all the days he's been gone after breaking his promise to try to take a break, she questions how he can keep doing this, how he can do it to her and to himself, over and over again. But when Peter tells Mary Jane that he loves her, she stops, and reflecting on the love they share, she hugs her husband. Wincing from the pain, Peter explains that while his ribs are still delicate, MJ will never know how much he needed her hug and how much he needs her. Sitting down next to Peter, MJ replies that it's not so simple anymore. She can't continue to condone his constant exposure to danger. But the radio interrupts the conversation, and Peter must once again leave to stop a hostage situation nearby. With her husband returning to battle, Mary Jane goes downstairs to visit her friends and family, after realizing that brooding all alone won't help her. She tells Aunt May that in troubled times like these, there's nothing more important than being with family. Hours later, the news reports that the heroes have saved the affected citizens from madness, and their presence at the scene has turned the tide of the battle. Hearing this, Mary Jane smiles in relief, stating that the heroes may have saved them all. She then realizes that she was wrong to question Peter's decision to step up as Spider-Man in this critical moment, and win or lose, the fact that her husband is trying is what counts, and it's worth it. However, as time passes and the battle rages on, Richard loses patience while watching the news coverage and goes on a rant about evil running rampant in the world and how he feels like he's in prison again. As he continues that the good in the world was only an illusion, Mary Jane has had enough and tells him to shut up. She reminds Richard that the heroes are putting their lives on the line, that they're making a difference and giving people hope. Then, as MJ declares that she has faith that Spider-Man and his allies will win the battle, Aunt May proudly smiles. Finally, MJ tells Richard that she doesn't want to hear another negative word out of his mouth, leaving him speechless. After Carnage manages to escape the battle, Peter calls Mary Jane to meet him at an emergency room with their insurance cards. When she arrives, she is startled by all the injured and dying civilians, thinking that this must be what it's like to be in a war zone. She then tears up after meeting a woman whose husband was almost killed by Carnage, but a nurse then informs the woman that her husband is expected to survive, causing MJ to smile in relief. Just then, Peter comes out with his ribs all bandaged up and greets his wife, happy to see her. Running joyously into his arms, MJ exclaims that there is no way she's letting him out of her sight again, as Peter remarks that he loves her enthusiasm. However, as they leave, Peter tells Mary Jane that Carnage escaped and is still on the loose, dashing her hopes that he could go on his promised break. Upon returning home with his wife, Peter meets with his family, with the excuse that he was covering the battle for the Bugle. But after his father goes on another rant about the monsters threatening the city, Liz gets upset, and the Parkers watch as she walks away in tears over Harry's death. That night, Mary Jane wakes to find Peter destroying his photos, as he doesn't want any part in profiting from the devastation, or any part in glorifying Carnage. When he tells her that he is going back out as Spider-Man, she tells him to stop and listen to her for a moment. Although she hates that Peter's life is in constant danger and hates not knowing if he will return home alive, she realizes why he does it, and she honestly tries to accept it, and she loves him enough to try even harder. Hearing the support from his wife, Peter tells her she's the greatest. Mary Jane then tells her husband that he hit the jackpot and kisses him goodbye. Fueled by MJ's declaration of love and encouragement to go out and be a hero, Spider-Man swings back into the city, vowing to stop Carnage his way. An hour later, while Spider-Man's battle with Carnage rages on, Mary Jane waits anxiously for news of her husband. Suddenly, the phone rings, and she picks it up to find that it is Felicia Hardy who is calling to check on Peter. After informing Felicia on the dire situation, they end the call, leaving Felicia with the decision on whether she should try to help Peter, fearing that it may be suicide. Fortunately, Felicia makes the decision to help and saves Peter at a critical moment, giving Venom enough time to join in on the fight for a decisive victory against Carnage. Days later, after being recruited to fight in the Infinity Crusade by a goddess who teleported Spider-Man to a paradise and then disappeared, Peter thinks about how he is no good alone. He remembers earlier that evening, he was on the roof with Mary Jane, saying that he can't do Spider-Man without the support and the understanding of his incredible wife. But MJ felt like she'd only given her quiet acceptance at best, adding that the battle with Carnage changed them all. Peter questioned if the change was for the better, and MJ replied that he will never know for sure, explaining that Peter's constant efforts to question the correct course of action and his ability to make the right choice as a result is Spider-Man's greatest strength. However, Peter stated that his self-doubt can be his worst enemy. Then, as he started to swing away, MJ replied that it's only if he doesn't count Carnage, Venom, and Doc Ock, as she lit up a cigarette. With his recollection over, Spider-Man questions how the goddess's world can be a paradise without Mary Jane, and upon remembering her words, realizes that he has doubts over the goddess's plan. Peter's doubts then get him in trouble with the goddess herself, and he is banished to his soulscape to face his demons. He sees that he is surrounded by his friends and foes, but in reality, he is attacked by heroes devoted to the goddess. When Gamora attacks him, Spider-Man sees her not just as Mary Jane, but as the vixen character she plays on Secret Hospital. Upon seeing her get impaled by Green Goblin's razor bats, Peter realizes the display is a sick distortion of the Goblin's own impalement after Gwen's death, and knowing it's not real, he goes on to pass the goddess's test. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Mary Jane and Liz are doing aerobics while Aunt May keeps an eye on Normie. Liz is amazed at how Normie is opening up for the first time since his father's death, stating that May has a real way with children. But when Normie breaks his toy, Liz scolds him, causing MJ to try to calm Liz by explaining that it was only an accident. The moment is then interrupted by Aunt May, who is worried about Peter, but MJ quickly changes the subject to ask about his parents. When May states that they are working through their problems together, as a family, Liz gets sad, and picking up Normie, she remarks that she wishes things could be that easy for them. Returning home after stopping a mugging, Peter reflects on how he learned to never take things for granted during the recent battles with Carnage and the Infinity Crusade. Meanwhile, Mary Jane sings in the kitchen while preparing a surprise lunch for Peter, but his early return ruins the surprise, as he comments about the lovely aroma of Chanel No. 5 and oregano. After the Parkers have a playful exchange over his early return, Peter explains that he pulled some strings to see the Gamma virus demonstration later that day. However, as he begins kissing his wife, he tells her that they should take advantage of their leisure time together with some romance. Wrapping her legs around her husband, MJ begins to bring up the lunch she worked so hard on, but kissing Peter passionately and falling to the floor with him, she instead decides that leftovers will do. Later that day, while Peter goes to the Gamma demonstration, Mary Jane heads to work. While filming a scene for Secret Hospital, she accidentally ruins it by lighting a cigarette, even though her character Sybil doesn't smoke. Though she apologizes, the director decides not to do another take since they are running long, and tells her that the scene will be cut. This upsets Mary Jane as it's her only scene for the week, and she feels that her career is falling apart. As she smokes her cigarette, she considers telling Peter about it, but decides to keep quiet as she feels that her husband has enough problems to deal with. In the coming days, Peter and Mary Jane attend a meeting called by Harry's lawyer to go over his last will and testament. With everyone gathered, the lawyer plays a video of Harry that was recorded to be played in the event of his death, which surprises everyone. After Harry explains what is to be left to his family and friends, he then addresses the Parkers, pausing long enough to put on his green goblin mask. Harry says that he is giving them his mother's jewelry box as a memory of their friendship, adding that it will open on its own when the time is right, and it contains a big surprise. When the video ends, Liz breaks down in tears, as she was not expecting to see her late husband. After Mary Jane tries to comfort Liz, Felicia tells MJ that Peter left, while sarcastically joking about him jumping out the window again. But given the tense moment, MJ is in no mood for jokes, and tells Felicia to shut up. Meanwhile, Peter has taken the jewelry box to an isolated garbage dump and breaks it open to see what's inside. He is shocked to see a simple sheet of paper with the word "gotcha" written on it, and he throws the box in anger as he concludes that Harry has somehow faked his death. Later that evening, Peter visits Liz as Spider-Man to tell her that he thinks that Harry is still alive, but this angers her so much that she begins yelling and hitting him. The commotion brings Mary Jane downstairs to see what the problem is, and she is horrified to see her husband there as Spider-Man. After asking him what he's doing, she reminds him that Liz is in mourning and demands that he leave. Realizing that he is acting crazy, Peter makes a hasty retreat out the window, leaving Mary Jane to console Liz. While crying in Mary Jane's arms, Liz tells her that Spider-Man said terrible things about Harry and explains that she thought she was free, but it won't stop, and she can't take it anymore. The next morning, Mary Jane wakes up from a wonderful dream where she spent the day in a bikini with Peter at a faraway tropical paradise. However, as she opens her eyes, she is startled to see Peter sitting on the edge of the bed, brooding while in costume. Feeling guilty, Peter tells her that Flash Thompson almost died the night before, but Mary Jane refuses to allow her husband to blame himself for what happened, and then offers to make him breakfast. Soon, as he eats in the kitchen, Peter tells Mary Jane that after losing Harry, he realizes that he needs to hold onto the few friends he has left. Just then, Black Cat storms in through the skylight, furious that Peter did not call to tell her about Flash's injuries. She demands to know who was responsible, and upon learning it was Tombstone, tells Peter that she'll take down the villain herself, and adds that she's only the Black Cat to Peter from now on because she refuses to acknowledge him anymore as Felicia Hardy. After she leaves, Mary Jane comes to the realization that Felicia genuinely loves Flash. Afterward, Liz shows up to see Mary Jane, and she does not have good news. She explains that even though Harry is dead, Spider-Man's recent visit has made her realize that her life will never be normal again in New York, and she plans to move to Montana with Normie immediately, leaving control of Osborn Industries to the board of directors. Furthermore, the Parkers need to move out within 30 days, leaving them with a nearly impossible task of finding a new rental in New York on such short notice. Later, after a battle with Tombstone, Peter returns home wearing Black Cat's face disguise, just as Mary Jane is excitedly talking with her agent on the phone. Upon seeing her husband, MJ jokes that she hopes he's not dressing in Felicia's costumes too. Peter confirms it was just an emergency, and he has stopped by to get his spare mask. Mary Jane then excitedly shares the news that her agent's client has to move to California, and her brownstone apartment is available for them if they decide to move there. At first, Peter makes excuses for turning it down, including the cost and having to commute to school. However, Mary Jane convinces Peter to make the sacrifices, claiming they are both employed and have the money, plus the location will help with her commute to work. When Peter finally agrees, MJ holds her husband, and upon stating that he has a soft touch, suggestively asks if there is anything else he wants to do. Peter agrees, and while heading to the bedroom, states that he slipped a spider tracer on Felicia to help him track Tombstone in the event she goes after him again, proclaiming that no more of his friends will get hurt. Mary Jane listens as she sits on the bed, and while she feels that Felicia can handle herself, she realizes that Peter's sense of responsibility won't let him take that chance. Later at work, Mary Jane angrily states her line that she can't deal with Parker's secret life, and it's over between them. The irony of the line is not lost on Peter, who watches the emotional performance on the set of Secret Hospital. As the shooting ends, some of the crew admire MJ's performance, discussing how she has made the most out of her reduced role on the show. Meanwhile, Peter is proud of his wife, but he can't help but think that the dialogue cuts a little too close to home these days. As Peter approaches Mary Jane, she is meeting with the crew from Soap Opera Weekly for an interview. When they ask her what her inspiration is, she says it is her husband Peter and kisses him in front of the cameras. While Peter notices that MJ handles the cameras like a pro, he's a bit more uneasy in front of the crowd. Then, when the audience coaxes the couple for another kiss, Peter quietly asks his wife if this is some twisted revenge for his recent broken promises. They are then interrupted by the recruiter Fiona, who tells Peter that they will make the final decision on the publicity photo job that he applied for after seeing samples of his work. Afterward, Peter looks for Mary Jane backstage, and when a door opens behind him, he ducks straight into her dressing room, startling her. In response, Mary Jane jokes about getting revenge, and when Peter starts to apologize again over his recent absences, Mary Jane kisses him to shut him up. She then assures Peter that she isn't mad at him and adds that her acting career gives her an outlet to vent her frustrations, which also helps her with her performances. As she is telling him this, Peter sees the front page of the Daily Bugle, which features Betty Brant's expose on the inner-city tests being conducted by Empire State University. Peter tells Mary Jane that he needs to go and quickly changes into Spider-Man. As Peter swings away, he hates that he had to abandon his wife again, but knows she will understand because this time, the reason is tied to his personal life and future as Peter Parker. While Peter is away in a battle with Sandman, Mary Jane checks her voicemails at home while smoking. There are a number of calls from the publicist for Secret Hospital, as well as a call from Nick Katzenberg, demanding to talk to Peter. Mary Jane hangs up before he finishes, thinking that while Katzenberg is Peter's problem, she's trying to deal with the rest of their lives. As Mary Jane blows out another puff of smoke, she thinks about how she needs to quit this dirty habit before it kills her, but decides to put it off for another day. Later, Peter quietly returns home, but Mary Jane reveals that she knows he's there by questioning if he tracked any soot in from the roof. When Peter walks into view and asks how she knew, she points out that they have been together for years, and she's developed her own spider sense, but for only a particular spider. Then, after discussing the fact that they have to move out soon, MJ asks if Peter wants to go check out their potential next home after his classes. But Peter says that he's got to be honest, to maintain a healthy marriage, and admits that he has to run an errand as Spider-Man after class. After he promises to be careful, MJ simply tells him to go ahead, and that it's no problem. Later, Mary Jane prepares to go check out the apartments alone when she is visited by Aunt May, who opens up about her history with Peter's parents. She explains that she married Ben Parker at a private ceremony with only Richard and Mary as the witnesses, but when they talked about it recently, they did not remember this. Mary Jane tells May that there is probably a reasonable explanation for this, and while May agrees, she asks MJ to not tell Peter since he already has so much on his mind. When May leaves, Mary Jane resents the fact that May laid this unsettling revelation on her and then told her to keep it a secret from her husband. She then lights up a cigarette while she contemplates if she should tell Peter the truth or not, remembering what Peter said about maintaining a healthy marriage by being honest. As she asks herself if things could get any worse, Peter is across town tied to a chair, while being fed drugs to keep him weak. That's when Orwell Taylor enters the room and tells Spider-Man that they are putting him on trial, and if he is found guilty, he will be executed. The next day, Mary Jane goes to the television office to discuss her character Sybil, upset about her reduced part in the show. While the director explains that her character hasn't caught on as much as they had hoped, they managed to arrange some public appearances at the mall for her. Insulted, MJ sarcastically asks if he was going to book her for a monster truck rally next, before storming out of the office. Shortly after, MJ grabs lunch and begins to smoke at the table, dwelling on the fact that Peter didn't return home the night before. She is particularly upset as she fears that he may be dead, and she doesn't know how to deal with the fact that Aunt May thinks that his parents may be imposters. Just then, a man sitting nearby complains about her cigarette smoke. She defensively tells him that she isn't in a non-smoking area and says she has rights, adding that if she wants to kill herself by smoking, that's no one's business but her own. Hearing herself say this, Mary Jane is stunned silent, and she begins to wonder if she's really killing herself and if that's something she really wants. Meanwhile, a drugged Spider-Man pleads guilty after being forced to face all his faults and failures, and with no plea for mercy, Orwell finds Spider-Man guilty and sentences him to death.